so I guess I'm just gonna get started. I don't know if you can see my sweater, but it's
Oh my God.
Hey, look at that.
yeah.
Someone had to actually make that sweater.
Yeah.
That sweater exists.
It's got a little Rufus on the sleeve as well.
Nice.
I can't say I knitted it, but I bought it. So, or
Chris has that underwear. You have that in underwear, don't you, Chris?
That's in the thong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay,
Yeah.
so I got to ask you guys, when you were writing Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure back in the 80s, did you ever think in your wildest dreams that 30 years later, people would be clamoring for a sequel, like begging for it, that it becomes the most anticipated movie of the year, I'd argue?
When we were first writing it, we didn't even know if anyone would read the script. Yeah. Oh, we had no idea that this would happen. In fact, when we wrote the first one, we just were in a vacuum writing it on spec. When we wrote the second one, we were writing it for a studio. We knew there'd be a sequel, but we really did think it was done. And thank God for the fans, and thank God for social media, because if it weren't for the power of people's individual voices, I don't think the powers that be would have understood that there was in fact a market for a third one.
Huge market.
Yeah, if we could have time traveled in 1992, let's say, till now, we would have been like, how the hell did that happen?
Part of that due, though, to the reaction to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, because it's interesting to look back. I feel like at the time, people didn't really get it, but now it's probably even more popular than Excellent Adventure. I think it's maybe aged better, and people are just kind of more into it now because it's so crazy.
People seem to like one or the other more. I still think more people like Excellent Adventure, but those who like Bogus Journey, yes, they like it very much because it's sort of strange.
I would admit that Bogus Journey is my favorite by far, because it's just a movie that I watched over and over and over again as a kid.
Oh, that's interesting. I think we didn't get, as writers, I think we didn't totally nail the third act on Bogus Journey.
Really?
Yeah, we made a couple key mistakes, and part of it was I think we were rushed to write it, rushed to rewrite it. We had a different ending, and it was rushed edited. But I don't think Bill and Ted as characters drove the third act as much as they probably ought to have, and it felt a little bit kitchen sinky in the last third. That's my opinion. Like I'm a fan of the first 2/3 of the movie, and then I feel like it fell apart, and I feel it was kind of our fault.
I agree.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think that probably the construction of the good robots, it probably should have been more them rather than them just farming it out to a Martian named Station, which I think, is weird. It's definitely weird, but I don't know dramaturgically, I don't know whether that was the best.
Well,
idea.
I showed them to my girlfriend recently, who's a couple years younger, and Station by far were her favorite. Like she just was all, whenever they would come on screen, she'd be like,
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
Interesting.
yeah, I thought they were the greatest. Okay. In that vein, then, if you say that the third act, you look back and you wish that you had done things a little bit differently, is maybe the opening kind of Bill and Ted Face the Music something of a reaction to that? Because it does feel like it's not necessarily a backtrack. It acknowledges that the ending happened, but it's not as, it doesn't open with them like the biggest movie star, not movie stars, biggest musicians in the world blasting off into space for NASA. Like it's pulled back a little bit.
Well, you do have to remember that title sequence for Bogus Journey, like all that stuff at the end of like they play Mars. We didn't write that. That's not us. No, we didn't write that stuff. That was just sort of added. So that was not our version of it. Ends at that concert where they play and everybody in the world's watching, and you get and so for a moment they get the eyes of the world on them and play apparently a cover of a Kiss song. It seems like that's what they're doing. But or the Kiss song is just soundtrack. But that we didn't really think that, and also comedically, we kind of like the idea that they actually all that stuff did happen and they did save the world, and let's say they did become whatever Lennon and McCartney. Well, then what do we do with that? Where's the story from that? I guess it's just the estrangement of Lennon and McCartney getting back together. And we didn't want to write that. That didn't seem funny.
It didn't seem funny, and it also, Bill and Ted would never separate. We couldn't,
No.
if they had actually done that, then where do you go, as Chris said, on a story level, and they would never be apart. You couldn't do a story where they're estranged and now they come back together. And there was some talk from some people about what if you start it that way, and it just never would have worked. The guys wouldn't have done it, Alex and Keanu, we couldn't have done it. So you're right. We did want to address those title sequences, or that title sequence, which as Chris said, it was written by the title company as jokes, and kind of bummed us out because it boxed us in a corner. So we wanted to grapple with it directly up front and go, look, we know that stuff theoretically happened in those jokes in the end titles, but here's what really happened. They were flashes in the pan, and they've been struggling to make it work since then and start the movie from there. It felt like a much more real place to start the movie from.
Well, not only that, but I mean, Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, they kind of jump right back into the roles too. It feels like they've never been gone. And I think I was kind of surprised by that, because I always figured it would be a little bit more, you know, it's strange watching them, you know, the middle-aged guys now jumping back into those kind of what you would think of as teenager roles, but it really worked well. And I think because there's no meanness about them, like it's just kindness. I think they radiate that, which I really appreciated. I don't know if you agree.
Bill and Ted do kind of radiate kindness. Ed and I do not radiate kindness.
We suck it in and then blow out darkness.
Somehow. It's some bizarre chemical reaction. Two deadly chemicals come together to make, you know, something that's usable. I
think one of the reasons we loved playing them at the beginning was they were a manifestation of what we projected as, you know, I'm using a word Chris has used earlier, aspirational parts of ourselves, which made them really fun to play, because who wouldn't want to be able to go through the world with that kind of benevolence of spirit, you know? But it's hard as a human being to live in a world that way, really, I think, without being a fool.
I mean, considering though we're living in a very dark time, I mean, there's something almost that it's almost like medicine when you watch it now though, because, you know, we live in a very cynical age, and I find that they're very uncynical characters. Right. And it is refreshing to watch a movie like that, where you can go and you could say, oh, these guys aren't assholes necessarily. They're just nice guys. They are what they seem. And it was very refreshing and life affirming, I think, watching the movie last night.
I appreciate that. Well, you know, that's why they're fun to write, because it's genuine to them. It's not like we had to sit down and think, how do we make this movie uncynical? It was never a question, because that's who Bill and Ted are, and that's who Billy and Thea are. So,
and it was a brilliant idea bringing them in too, by the way, because I found that they really helped make the movie.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
I think that the comedy here is mainly rooted in like pain and deep insecurity, and there's not a lot of mockery. We're not really. I mean, I've done so much mockery in my life. It's ridiculous. I've done so much mockery, and I do it consistently to this very day, you know, but Bill and Ted don't, and this is not mockery. That's not mockery at all. They're not mocking anybody, and the movie's not really mocking anybody. There's actually, it's to the most of the jokes, if you think about it, they emerge from inner doubts and inner fears and inner pains, and those are, I think, I don't know if they're better jokes. They're different kind of jokes. Well, I do think they're better jokes, yeah.
I think there's a different tone, a very different tone. I haven't seen Excellent Adventure in over a decade, and
really?
I watched it about 2 weeks ago, and I've only seen it once since it came out, Excellent Adventure. I watched it a couple weeks ago, and I thought, wow, it really is a different tone. You know, it's jokier than Face the Music. Face the Music doesn't have jokes per se.
Yeah.
It's more comedic situations. It's also, you know, it's a product of where Chris and I were then when we wrote it. It's less nuanced. It isn't steeped with the stuff Chris was talking about. This is a movie about disappointment. It's an absurd, silly comedy about disappointment and dashed dreams, and how do you regain a sense of purpose in the world if what you thought was your destiny turns out to not have happened? How do you keep moving forward?
I have to admit that probably my favorite character in the film, though, and still in the series has always been Death. Maybe I have more in common with him, and I always loved that it was. I have to say, Bogus Journey was the movie that introduced me to Ingmar Bergman.
Oh,
Cool.
Us too.
Cool.
Well, I mean,
sorry.
to the degree that, I mean, thank you. Death is very much that idea of just like, he's just so insecure. He's so pathetically insecure at every moment. First he wants to seem cool and scary, and then he's quickly revealed as not being cool and scary, and he just is a loser. He's a loser who has no friends. And why would you? Why would Death have any friends? Death wouldn't have any friends. And he doesn't. And he thinks these guys can be his friends. And he just like Dennis in this one, basically.
Dennis is great, by the way. All right,
yeah, Anthony Carrigan did an incredible job.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate the time, and then good luck with the movie. I thought it was great.
Thanks
Thank
very
you so much for having us on. We really appreciate it.
Let's rock! Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Yeah, Billy, Dennis! How you doing?
Well, you know, we're dead and we're in hell.
But how you doing?
We're good.